Dorie Miller, the cook who turned the gun. It was a morning like any other. The smell of coffee in the galley, a few jokes about yesterday's duty shift, and the calm waters of Pearl Harbor, where the battleships slept like giant whales. And then, a sound no one could ever mistake, the scream of dive-bombing engines. In the sky, enemy wings. On the deck of the West Virginia appeared the figure of a short, solid man. No officer's stripes on his sleeves. He wasn't supposed to be here at all, just a cook, a working man, someone whose hands usually held knives, not weapons. His name was Dorie Miller, and in the cook's manual, there's no line that says, "Shoot down dive bombers." But today, manuals weren't going to save anyone. The first blast tore apart conversations. The second shattered routines. Wounded men were carried on stretchers. Someone cried out for a doctor. Someone prayed. Someone searched for a commander. The commander was badly wounded. And so this man, the one who yesterday peeled potatoes, lifted the officer with the white gloves of authority. He carried him the way he once carried sacks of flour back in Texas. He hauled him to safety. Not because of an order, but because there was no one else left. And then he came back, not for praise, not for medals. He came back because he saw it, an anti-aircraft gun, the sky full of targets, and an empty space behind the weapon. And he stepped into it. No one had ever trained him for this. But there are things no one teaches. You just decide. To understand who manned that gun that morning, you have to go back to a place with no guns, no naval parades. Dorie grew up under a different sky, the vast, dusty Texas sky, where the rules were simple. A farming family, work from childhood. The American story in its plainest edition. If you want it, do it. No one else will do it for you. He grew up strong, real working strength that everyone noticed. He loved boxing. He knew how to take a punch and how to wait for his moment. Those two skills, taking the hit and waiting, would return again under sirens and fire. When he joined the Navy, the system told him, "You will serve." Not fight, not command, just serve. Carry, cut, deliver. That was the era. Stripes were not handed to everyone, doors were not open to everyone, and yet the Navy was still a team. A ship is a world where every man is responsible for his own part. Dorie's part was the kitchen, the heavy labor no one noticed while plans were intact. But the problem with plans is that they break easily. And December 7th shattered everything. The harbor became a shooting gallery. Battleships turned into targets. On the West Virginia, smoke mixed with sea wind, burns with screams, orders with instinct. And in those seconds, on every square foot of the world, there was only one question. Where are you needed right now? Everyone had their own answer. Dorie found his first where his commander lay, and then again, where the gun stood empty. He took position, hands on the controls, eyes on the sky. The first bursts came the way first steps always do, a little clumsy, but determined. Shells tore the air, salt wind struck his face, and slowly in his hands, new muscle memory formed, the memory of a gunner. His fingers, used to knives, learned the recoil. His eyes, used to scanning for fresh vegetables in the storeroom, learned to find a target in chaos. Did he shoot down one plane? Two? More? History loves numbers. Men value something else. He closed a gap in the defense where a gap had opened. He did what someone else should have done, but didn't. And if you ever find yourself in a moment of panic, with an empty space beside you, remember, emptiness always waits for someone. That day, it waited for a cook. The barrage doesn't last forever. There always comes a moment when silence returns, but it's not the same silence. It tastes of metal. The deck was left with casings and exhaustion. Some survived, some didn't. The commander didn't. Life isn't a movie. Sometimes you do everything right, and the outcome is still tragic. But between the first blast and the last prayer, one thing had happened. Rank gave way to manhood. And that is always a victory. Stories like this don't end with applause, they get harder. America saw the face of a man who wasn't supposed to fire, but did. And it said, "Thank you." An admiral shook his hand and gave him a medal. Newspapers wrote about him. Posters showed his face. His name became a symbol. A symbol that duty begins not with an order, but with a decision. If you're waiting for the easy road, there isn't one. Fame has a quiet temptation to stay where you're safe and admired. But there's another road, back to where the question always waits. Where am I needed? Dorie chose the second. Not because he craved combat, but because men's arithmetic is simple. If you can be more useful somewhere, that's where you go, even if no one asks. The war kept shifting islands, maps, and headlines. On another ship, in another ocean, his days returned to routine. Watch duty, hard work, discipline. True heroism doesn't live in headlines. It lives in the habit of doing your job, again and again. And yes, this story has a third act, one that rarely makes it into parades. Ships aren't invincible. Sometimes the sea rises not with waves, but with fire. And on such a day, each man has his seconds, his choices, his silence. If you expect a hero to always survive, he does, just not always for himself. Sometimes heroes die right on time for others. What remained? A name. And 3 words every man should say to himself when the world is dark and frightening. Where am I needed? That knowledge remained for us. It doesn't matter what's printed on your badge. What matters is what's written inside you. And justice has its slow way. Years later, America named a massive ship after that very cook. Because sometimes, those names are what keep the course steady. At this point, it's worth asking, what makes a man ready to take the gun if he spent his life peeling potatoes? The easy answer is character. But character isn't a gift, it's training. It grows in the little daily things done right, showing up on time, finishing what you start, keeping your word, lifting the extra load when a buddy is tired. When the big days come, it turns out you already have the muscle. You just lift a little more. Another thing, respect for the work. Doesn't matter what your official job description says. What matters is, the ship is you. If there's a problem nearby, it's your problem. If there's an empty space, it's your place. That attitude turns a cook into a gunner, a laborer into a cornerstone, an ordinary day into the right day. And right days add up to the right life. And about fear, yes, it was there. It always is. Men over 35 know fear is natural for adults who have something to lose. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's managing it. Like a boxing round, you know you'll take hits, but you move forward anyway, because standing still means losing everything. Dorie knew how to take a hit. Life taught him that long before war. Sometimes we want heroes without flaws. But real men aren't flawless, they're resilient. They joke when they're scared, curse when they're hurt, argue with their officers when they feel they must, and still fall back into line when the argument is over. They make mistakes and correct them. They don't act the part. They live the work. That's what makes them essential. And one more thought, especially for those working in the shadows. Your work is seen. Maybe not every day, maybe not by everyone. But when the world shakes, it's your skills that become the foundation of someone else's decision. Some men get the spotlight, others get trust. And trust is a currency stronger than applause. It's measured not by clapping, but by who gets the call at 3 in the morning. We often compare ourselves to the people on TV. But truth is, the world doesn't always need generals. More often, it needs the men who keep the weight of the structure standing. Being a man is not about rank, not about followers. It's about showing up where you're missing. Dorie Miller was that kind of man. And that's his greatest lesson. Does this story have room for humor? Absolutely. Without humor, hard work breaks you. Imagine him telling the story at a table with friends. You know, my duty schedule didn't exactly say, shoot down a couple of planes. But the cook's job is to handle the hot stuff. That day, the hot stuff was in the sky. Laughter isn't carelessness, it's oxygen for patience. And men know, sometimes the right joke keeps the nerve steady when everything else is falling apart. So what do we take from this story, besides respect for one man? A few simple rules. First, hold your ground, not the one you dream of, the one in your hands today. Make it strong, and tomorrow you'll be trusted with more. Second, don't wait for perfect conditions. They don't exist. There will be noise, dust, and mistakes. Your task is to be ready and find the gap you can close. Third, don't pass responsibility to rank. Ranks change, you remain. Fourth, respect the team. A ship sails not because of its captain, but because of everyone. If a stretcher falls, pick it up. If a gun is empty, ask what you can do right now. Fifth, remember that the outcome won't always be pretty. Sometimes you'll do everything right and still lose. That doesn't erase the meaning of your decision. We answer for the act, not the accident. One day your son might ask, "Dad, what does it mean to act like a man?" The answer is simple. When you do what's needed, even if it's not your duty, and you do it like there's no one else. That definition never ages. That's how the cook on the West Virginia lived. That's how men live in factories, on construction sites, in offices, on farms. That's how the world holds together. And finally, about memory. Memory isn't granite and metal, though those matter too. Memory is when, in your next December 7th, whatever month it comes, you step into the empty place and say, "Today, I'm needed here." You don't do it for your name to be written down. You do it so the ship keeps sailing. That's the grown man's reason. And it's worth it. Stories like this aren't about movie superheroes. They're about men who hold the world steady while others learn. Sometimes they get medals. Sometimes silence. But always, the respect of those who understand what strength is really made of. So if you want one takeaway for the day, here it is. Don't ask whether you're allowed to man the gun. Ask whether it needs to be empty. Dorie Miller never planned to be a symbol. He just planned to do his job. And when the world asked for more, he gave more. That's why his name outlived his duty. And that's why you don't need a title to be someone who matters. Now ask yourself, where is your gun today? It might be a project, a family, a team. It might be a conversation no one wants to start, or a decision no one wants to make. If it's empty, it's yours. Step up, grab the handles, and hold the line until the sky clears again. That's it. The simple story of a simple man. But it's stories like these that keep us on course. Because manhood isn't about loud words. It's about the quiet, "I'm here," spoken at the right moment. And if tomorrow someone needs that moment, let them see you standing there,